Senator, thanks for coming down here.
Thanks for having me, man.
We've had conversations in the past about this. I joked with you at once. I was your constituent once when you were in the House, and
well, now again.
Yeah, now again, I'm your constituent. I want to start off with the big topics. I want to start with tariffs. Last time you were on, you were saying they can be a useful tool when used appropriately.
Yeah.
Are there circumstances where you believe now that this administration is using them appropriately?
Right now,
Yes.
No. I think this is a very kind of ham-handed approach to this. A lot of times what you need to do is really have an overall goal and policy goal, right? And some that you have to actually match with like other policies, like industrial policy. But what's happening right now is you created a lot of instability in the market. I was just in Europe talking to European leaders. They're talking about, trying to reshore some of their businesses back. I'm talking to businesses here. They're afraid of the fact that they're just going to have to pass a lot of costs off to their clients and to the customers. I was just visiting TSMC right before this. There's one machine that they import from Amsterdam or from the Netherlands. It costs $200 million. 10% tariff on that right away. It's another $20 million on top. And then you start adding other things like fuel costs and things like that. So this is the kind of thing that you have to do and approach in a good manner. I'll give you a good example of how we did it correctly. During the first administration, I worked with Donald Trump and his administration to pass the USMCA, which is the redo to NAFTA.
Correct.
That was a really good way that we worked together in a bipartisan manner that brought stability to the markets, that brought predictability. And I think that's the way you approach this in a manner that you can do this. It's predictable. And we got it all done within 6 months, right? And I think that's a better approach to this.
When the Trump administration has said that the reason why they're moving at what they call Trump speed is because if they had gone to nations and asked for cooperation, they may not have been as willing to cooperate. But by making this threat and saying tariffs are going to be put in place, that it's forcing them to the table. They're now saying there's 18 deals on paper, over 30 countries they're negotiating with, and they are touting $5 trillion in domestic and foreign investment in the U.S. economy, adding 400,000 jobs. Is that a defense in saying that if they're doing this and it turns out that way, that this will have turned out to be a good idea?
Sure, if that's the case. Now, they started, there was going to be 120 deals in X amount of days, and now we're down to 18 notional deals, right? We haven't seen any of this, right? But the other problem is that we've kind of established a pattern and a reputation with these countries that they're not going to be very trusting of us. There's going to be a lot of companies that are going to, and foreign companies are going to start looking for new domestic partners because they feel that at any point this president could just have a conniption and just change tariff laws, right? The other thing is, we've shown China a really good example of how they're going to be able to hurt us in the future. China said, basically, F you, and now they got their way. And at the same time, we weren't able to coordinate our approach to China with Europe. So they know that they're going to be able to divide Europe and the United States, and that's going to be a big problem going into the future. So what we may have gained in the short term, which I don't think is as much as the president is saying, is really going to hurt us in the long term, which is our ability to have a real leverage against China when we combine our allies, Europe, North America, United States.
So when I've defended the Trump administration, part of the ways I've done it is I've gone back and replayed the words of Chuck Schumer, replayed the words of President Obama, and others that have said China is the problem. These tariffs are important. Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker of the House, with the charts of saying this is what China and their unfair business practices, and we have to use these tools to stop China.
Absolutely.
So that's, I guess that's my question about how do we get rid of the partisan part of this and explain where this is the wrong way to approach the right goal.
And look, I've been one of the bigger China hawks on the Democratic side for quite a while, to the detriment, not to detriment, but to the anger of a lot of people within my own party. And there is a problem with China policy in terms of, number one, some of the shoring of our businesses that are going over there, some of the intellectual property theft that's happening, some of the actual espionage, corporate espionage that's done by the government. And I think we have to have a bigger overall policy that deals with all that. And that's on the punitive side. We need to punish them. I think we should be going after executives that are in charge of these companies that are doing corporate espionage. I think we should be figuring out a way to get some of these businesses back to the United States or out of China. Want to do all of that. But the only way you do that is if you have a strong economy. And the only way that we're going to have a very strong economy to be able to leverage all of that is you have to have allies that are willing to join with you, right? So that means we shouldn't be fighting with Canada. Canada, the United States, and the European Union should be all getting together and trying to pressure China together for them to change their policy. Because if we do this on our own, we may not have the economic leverage, besides the fact they own some of our T-bonds to begin with.
Senator Gallego is joining us in studio. So then on this issue, last part of this issue, and I know this is a big thing that you're dealing with, especially with your history as a veteran, the rare earth minerals, what's needed for national defense. China's saying they're not going to sell them here. Now there's a U.S. company that the only one that does it in America says they're not going to sell them to China. How do we resolve the issue of reliance on whether it's antibiotics or these critical minerals that are necessary for national defense? How do we resolve the issue of dependence on them so it's not a tool they can use against us?
So we've been talking for many years, especially post-COVID, of what's called nearshoring, right? Either bringing those manufacturers, those necessary medical equipment, antibiotics, all that back to the United States or to allies, right? And so we need to figure out and continue to do that. And that has been happening. We've seen a lot of people move out of China because they don't want to have that exposure, because there's been pressure by the administration to do that. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, but can that be done? Can we repatriate? Can we bring back into the U.S. the manufacturing of antibiotics and do it in a cost-effective way? Because healthcare costs are one of the biggest issues for Americans.
Sure can, yeah.
So can you do that? Can you bring them back to the United States and still manufacture them in a cost-effective way?
Well, absolutely, especially because a lot of this stuff ends up being automated. The bigger, some of the things we have to do is, number one, there is infrastructure for this already, both here and in actually some of our territories, like Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. They have these factories. We also have to get the manpower. We do have a lack of workers, but also a lot of this can be done locally. It can be done and can be done effectively. Wall Street has to stop being very greedy. This is also another area that we have to get more in alignment with Democrats and Republicans. A lot of times, the most unpatriotic people are Wall Street companies that are just trying to make as much profit as possible, and that's why they put this stuff in China. But yes, it absolutely can be done here, and it can be done in a profitable manner. And of all places where it would end up being beneficial, it would be Arizona. But we have to do it in a manner that's smart, that's planned out, that doesn't cause chaos to our 401k markets, and also the same time doesn't alienate our allies, especially our economic allies that we need going into the future.
So let's shift to the immigration issue. Everybody now is
going easier now.
Well, I think so, because
no, it's good. Yeah.
The frustration is, I know that we all are fixated on El Salvador and trips to, and this partisan argument about it. But the solution, I want to know about the solution. Border security. It seems like they've secured the border and sent a message, and we're better at it than we were before. Yeah. But what do we do as far as our immigration policy? Because if we're creating as many jobs as we are, we need the workforce. The example I use in my world is in Arizona. In 2006, 2007, we were building about 65,000 homes a year in Arizona. Yeah. We're not even at half of that right now, and it's a workforce issue, not a demand issue.
Yeah, and I worked in that. Growing up, I worked in construction with my family. My family were all Mexican immigrants.
So how do we address this?
Well, there's two things, right? Number one, we need to secure the gains we have right now, right? So the secure the gains we have right now means the border crossings are at all-time low. That it's not easy to do. The president has done a lot of work, but it is requiring a lot of money, and it's pulling from a lot of resources. We need to go back and sit down with the president, and like we tried before with both presidents, and actually bring more of that resources and that's sustainable. So let's give the Border Patrol everything they want for how many men they need for the border. How many vehicles they need. Put walls and barriers where it's necessary and needed. Open up more ports of entries, right? So you could come here legally. Make sure that they're fully staffed, make sure that people can actually check it. Now, when you're dealing with asylum seekers, we need to reform the asylum system. There's just no way anybody could look at what happened in the last 4 years that we could look at it, and this is for more of a message to the left. The asylum system was abused to the point where it drove Americans and even immigrants mad that people were able to just come to the border, claim asylum, and they're here and they have a work permit for 7 years. And there are people that have been here for years trying to get work permits, they still can't get it, right? And so we need to change that. I think there needs to be a stricter requirement. And also, the idea that you could wait 7 years before you get your first asylum hearing is ridiculous. There have been bills in the past. I've been in support of this. We need to hire as many immigration judges as possible so we can quickly make decisions. You can even make decisions at the border, right? As someone comes in, they claim asylum, put them right in front of a judge or an immigration, someone who's going to make an immigration decision right away. So that way the message gets back across the world that you just can't come to the United States and you're automatically going to get it. And so don't waste your money paying money for coyotes. Don't sell your property because the chances you're getting are very slim to none. That is step one, because that helps stop the irregular flows in, both illegal and asylum seekers. Number two, let's open up a really good guest worker program that is flexible, right?
Are both sides of the aisle willing to work on that? Because, again, I take heat from my side of the aisle on this issue, but an effective guest worker program that works where people can actually support the economies in their countries, come to America, support our economy here with the jobs. Will it work?
I think so, but I think we also have to make sure that it is in the sectors that need the workers and not as an excuse to undercut U.S. wages, right? And so that does require, I think, for us to have a government that is extremely responsive. But also these work permits can't be forever, because I think that will be a problem. I think you could do 2-year work permits, and then if you're doing this, if you're doing well, you haven't had any work problems, if that sector still needs that type of manpower, then yes, you could keep continuing it. But it can't be used as a way to undercut U.S. wages. I think there is agreement on, let's stop everything we can from crossing the border that it's illegal, that is happening illegally. I think I have to work harder to get more of my colleagues to agree that the sound system needs to be fixed. Because I think that's one area that I'm kind of an outlier with Democrats on that. But I think that we could get there, and I do think that people believe that we have worker permits. Now, the last big thing is, what are we going to do with all the people that have been here forever, right? And that's going to take harder. But I do think Dreamers, for example, are the one exception that we should automatically just accept.
I agree.
Give them pathways to citizenship. It's ridiculous that we would inhumane and dumb for us to throw people out of this country that are as Americans, a lot of us, except for on paper.
Senator, I appreciate the time. It goes by
done already?
far too. We're done. It's over. We're out of time.
Please bring me back anytime.
I would love to,
it.
because I think the conversation of where there can be common ground, I think Americans are starving for that right now. That where Republicans and Democrats are never going to agree completely, but there is a common ground, and let's work for a best solution.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, look, even though getting illegal border crossing to near as zero as possible, it should be a bipartisan position. I think that's something that we could all start with right there.
All right, Senator Ruben Gallego joining us for a few moments. We'll be back.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.